Welcome. Today is Cracking the Code on Food Labels class. And my intention for this class is to give you an education on how to crack the code in the food labels that appear on all the packaged and processed food that we get in the grocery store. So my intention for this class is for you to be present, 100%, pay attention, because as if your life depended on it, because it actually does. If you can understand what food does when it goes into our body and what kinds of foods we want to be putting in our body, your life will completely change. So today's class is all about cracking the code. All right, so first of all, when we go into the store, we usually know what we're getting. We have a list, or we're going to get something for a recipe, or we're getting the same things that we always get every week because we're comfortable with it. So whether you shop at an organic food store like Whole Foods or Sprouts, or a normal store like Trader Joe's or Safeway or Lucky's or any kind of store like that, you're always going to run into labels on prepackaged food. Okay, so learning how to read those labels is going to be critical for you in understanding actually what is in that box or package. We know what is in whole food because it's sitting there, it's on the shelves, and it's a red bell pepper. And we know that the only ingredients in it are the red pepper. So when it comes to packaged foods, we have to understand the language. The government actually is required to put labels on their food so that we know actually what we're eating. Okay, but there's some loopholes and there's some tricky things that they do, and some tricks and tips that I am going to give you today to help you decipher what the labels really mean. Okay, so I also want to tell you that eating food can be looked at in a couple different ways. It can be eating for pleasure, it can be eating for necessity. What I want you to practice doing every now and then is thinking of food as putting gas in your tank. Okay? It gets us from one place to the next. Yes, we can enjoy food, it's pleasurable, we love different kinds of foods, but I want you to play with the idea of considering food to be gas in your tank. Now, keeping on that perspective, when you put, let's say, Diet Coke or even organic apple juice in the gas tank of your car, your automobile, do you think that it will run properly or run at all? Yes or no? No, it's not going to run. Why? Well, because your car was not designed to have juice or soda or anything other than gas in its gas tank. It wasn't designed to run on that. Same thing goes for our bodies. We wouldn't put gasoline in our system because our system is not designed to run on gasoline. Same holds true with chemicals, preservatives, additives, stripped, GMO'd foodstuffs, I call them. Our bodies are not designed to be able to run on that kind of foodstuffs, food that lacks nutrients. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when we get into the labels. And also, if you haven't had your food matrix class, you are going to get a dose of the processed food industry, which I call the food matrix. So that's a different class. But moving on. So what we're promoting is that you eat food, real food. And what we define as real food is food that comes from the ground, so either a tree or a plant or a vine, okay, that produces some kind of food, or it runs on the ground, so some kind of animal, or it swims in the water, some kind of fish, or it flies in the air. That is considered real food, okay? So that's your definition of it. All right, so let's think about a grocery store when you go shopping. What do you see around the outside of the grocery store typically? Okay, that's where you're going to see the produce section, that's where you're going to see the dairy section, that's where you're going to see the meats and the cheeses and the eggs, okay? So we call that the perimeter, okay? The perimeter of the grocery store is where you're going to find most of the whole foods. And the middle of the grocery store, where all those shelves are, that is where the processed food mostly is going to be. Also, frozen food will be in that middle section too, but right now we're just talking about the perimeter. On those shelves lies processed food. On the perimeter lies the whole foods, where you're going to get the most nutrients. So we like to promote that you shop the perimeter of any grocery store. Okay? All right, so we're gonna start with our first handout. You should have been emailed these along with this class, and the first handout looks like this. So it's got nutrition facts on the top. It's a food label with the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down the side of it. So we're gonna start discussing what a food label looks like. So get your handout that looks like that, and I'll give you a second. Okay, so hopefully you have your handout. We're gonna go one by one through the sections of your handout. Okay, this is a food label that you would typically see on probably a box of cereal. This is a box of cereal food label. Okay, so we're going to start with number one. Number one is the serving size. So the serving size is going to always tell you how much they decided, the manufacturer of the food decided they wanted to be a serving. So in this case, the serving size is 2/3 cup. Okay, so that's almost a whole cup of cereal is a serving size. So 2/3 cup, that's the serving size. Underneath that, it's going to tell you the servings per container. So if this is a box of cereal, okay, it's got about 8 servings in it, meaning that you do 2/3 of a cup 8 times and you've cleaned out the box. Okay, so your serving size is 2/3 a cup. There's 8 servings in that box. What's important to know about the top section is everything underneath it corresponds to serving size and amount of servings per container. Okay, now we're going to go on to number 2. So, we're going to go on to the next section, number 2 here, so that we can talk about the serving size and the servings per container. So we see here that there's 230 calories and there's 72 calories from fat. You'll notice that what it says above the calories section is that it is amount per serving. So that means that there are 230 calories in one serving of this cereal, and the serving is 2/3 cups. Okay, so everything corresponds to the serving size. Now, if you were to eat the whole box, you would multiply 230 calories times 8. Okay, so let's say you were hungry that day and you had 2 bowls of cereal. You consumed 460 calories from eating those 2 servings. Does that make sense? The calories from fat is 72. Okay, that's 1 serving. So you double that number if you're going to have 2 servings. Okay, makes sense? All right, let's go on to number 3. So this is where fat comes into play. So they tell you the kinds of fat and how much fat is in it. So in this one in particular, there's 8 grams of fat, and the saturated fats are 1 gram. They don't have to list the other fats, but this is just telling you that there's 1 gram of saturated fat. Now there's 2 different kinds of fats. Well, there's a couple more than 2, but we call them the good fats and the bad fats. Saturated fat is considered the bad fat. So this raises our cholesterol, okay? So we want to stay away from saturated fat. Polyunsaturated is going to be the better kinds of fat that you want to look for in here. Okay? All right, now right here, it's giving us the amount of cholesterol in it, which is 0 milligrams, and the amount of sodium, which is 160 milligrams. Okay, so this information is telling you about fats, cholesterol, sodium, and then carbohydrates. Okay? All right, so let's move on to carbohydrates, and let's talk about this for a second. So there's something called macronutrients, okay? Macronutrients are carbohydrates, proteins, and fat. Okay, those are macronutrients. Macro meaning bigger, like we have bigger amounts of those in our diet. The micronutrients are more of the vitamins and minerals, and we'll talk about that later. So the macronutrients, the American Heart Association bases a percentage that's listed here on what they recommend you have in macronutrients and micronutrients per day, okay? And so the American Heart Association bases these percentages that you see here on what they call the standard American diet. This is the American Heart Association, okay? And that is 2,000 calories per day is considered the amount of calories that we should get in the standard American diet. By the way, we call the standard American diet SAD, the acronym for SAD, because the standard American diet is sad. And it also doesn't apply to everyone. Everybody is different. So a standard American diet makes no sense. It is very sad. So we want you to kind of let go of the 2,000 calories per day that we're going to talk about in a second. And we, always address you as an individual when it comes to what kind of calories that you should be taking in and what kind of food you should be taking in. Okay. The American Heart Association also sets a standard for what's called recommended daily value. And what they're doing is they're recommending how much you should get of certain nutrients. Again, the American Heart Association is recommending how much everybody should get in nutrients. Again, everybody's different. So I'm going to explain to you why the percentages are on the food labels, but I want you to kind of let go of the recommended daily value, because you are you. You are not me. You are not Dr. Kobsar. You are not your mother or your brother or your daughter. All right, you are you, and what you need to take in every day is different. Okay, so we want to stress that. So in looking at this label, you see these percentage daily value here, and these percentages that run down the right side of the label. So looking at number 5, we're jumping ahead a little bit. There's a block here that says percent daily values. Okay, so they're giving us a template of what we should have each day. Okay, so let's just say fat, total fat. We should have 65 grams per day based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So up here, when you look at fat, it's going to tell you what percentage of your recommended daily value you're getting in this box of cereal. So you're getting 12% of what the government recommends you should get in fat. Okay, so that's what those percentages are. I'm going to tell you to just kind of let go of those, because again, your diet is specific to you, and that's what we teach you in this Recreate program, that it's bio-individuality. Everybody is different. Okay, so that's what those percentages are all about. All right, let's move on. Nutrients. So the next section, number 4, is where your nutrients are going to be shown. It's going to tell you what vitamins and minerals you're getting in each serving, and also again the percentage is going to correspond to the recommended daily value. So that's where you see what nutrients you are. Okay. All right. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. We talked about recommended daily value of fats, and so let's just go on to fats, and we're going to talk about fats for a little bit. So go to your next section of your handout, and you're going to see a kind of cutaway of a label that says saturated fat. All right, so if most of the content comes from unhealthy unsaturated fat, then you kind of want to stay away from it, because that's the unhealthy fat that isn't good for your body. Okay, so we see here that this one has 3.5 grams of fat in it, and then it breaks down what kind of fat it is. 2 grams of saturated fat, 0 grams of trans fat, and 1 gram of polyunsaturated fat. Okay, so polyunsaturated is the good fat, saturated is the bad fat, so there's a little more saturated than non. All right, and then there's this thing in here called trans fat, and I know that you've heard of that because it gained a lot of notoriety years ago when we understood that trans fat comes from a molecular redesigning of oils, and I'm not going to go into it, but it is harmful to our digestive system, very harmful to many aspects of the working systems of our body. So here's a loophole that the government gives to the processed food industry. The government says if this item has 0.5 or less grams of trans fat in it, you don't have to list it on your label. Why? Why did they do that? Follow the money, okay? Just follow the money trail. That's why. But I'm not going to get into that. I just want you to know that even though this says 0 grams of trans fat, there is trans fat in there. How do I know? Well, let's do the math, all right? How many total grams of fat are in this product? 3.5, right? Let's do the math. We got 2 grams of saturated fat, 1 gram of polyunsaturated fat. 1 plus 2 equals 3.5? I don't think so. That means that there is 0.5 grams of trans fat in there, but they list that there's 0. Therein lies the loophole. I wouldn't buy this product because I don't want trans fat in my system, not even 0.5 grams per serving, because by the time you finish this box, you've had 4 grams of trans fat. Okay, so that's a little inside scoop on the loopholes that the government gives to the processed food industry. A little bit about sodium. You just want to watch your sodium intake because it can raise your blood pressure. And in your binder there is a list of how much sodium you should take in. I'm not going to go into it right now. It's kind of based on, you know, your body weight and different things like that. But I want you to know that just watching your sodium intake is important, and that's listed there. Fiber. Okay, there's different kinds of fiber, and if you see under dietary fiber, it's broken down into sugar, how many grams of sugars are in that. So what you need to know is that white pastas, crackers, breads, white flour, enriched flour, stripped flour, that turns to sugar in your body immediately. So even though we think that we're eating whole grain bread, if it says enriched on it, that means that it's been stripped, that white flour was used, and that is more like in lines of a simple sugar that's going to break down easily into your bloodstream as sugar. Okay, so we have to watch the amount of sugar in here. Okay, all right, moving on. We already talked about the calories, okay, but just a reminder that the calories are based on how many servings. So in this particular label, it's a box of crackers. 8 crackers is 1 serving, and there's about 12 servings in there, so there's a lot of crackers in there. So let's do the math. All right, 8 crackers equals 130 calories. 32 of those calories are from fat. If you eat 16 crackers, how many calories are you consuming? 260. Okay, how many calories from fat are you consuming if you eat 16 crackers? 64. Okay, so we have to do the math. They don't make it easy on purpose. All right, that's why we're cracking the code on food labels for you today. Okay, all right, moving on. So we're going to go to the next handout. Oops, I went too far. Hold on. So this is Coca-Cola. Okay, so this handout is about Coca-Cola. All right, let me get to the right place. Okay, first it's going to tell us the ingredients that are in a Coke. So I just want you to look at your handout that says Coca-Cola on it, and I want you to look at the ingredients. All right, what do you think about that after you read the ingredients there? Do you think that's food? Do you think that that's anything that our body can use? Phosphoric acid, natural flavors, caffeine, high fructose corn syrup, caramel color. That's not food. This is what I call foodstuffs. Okay, so you need to look at the ingredients. The ingredients are always going to be listed on a label underneath or kind of to the side of the nutrition label part that we just discussed. Okay, moving on, let's look at everything else that's in a Coca-Cola. So nutrition facts, serving size is 1 can. We got 140 calories in that can, okay, and we got 39 grams of sugar. Wow, 39 grams of sugar. Okay, 100% of the calories in every can is sugar. So 39 grams of sugar. We're going to do a little math here because we're going to calculate sugar and calories. All right, 39 grams of sugar times 4, because 4 calories equals 1 gram of sugar, is 156 calories. So this calorie count actually isn't right if you do the math correctly. So you also need to be careful about that. Really what you're drinking here is coloring, chemicals, high fructose corn syrup, and sugar. Does your body know what to do with that? I mean, when your body sees things coming down the pike, you know, your liver has to process it, your digestive system, your small intestine, your large intestine, stomach acid, like it all looks at this stuff coming down the pike, like chips and crackers and Doritos that have 35 ingredients, and it's saying, what the heck do you want me to do with this? Because I can't process this stuff. And stuff that the body can't process gets moved to the side and stored as fat. All right, that's why gaining weight is so easy when we're eating processed food and not paying attention to what is in the food when we're eating it. Okay, so that is Coca-Cola. Next label, we're gonna look at potato chips. Lay's potato chips. So I want you first to look at the ingredients in this, okay? Just read through it really quick. potatoes, sunflower oil, slash and or corn oil. That's what gets me. Which one is it? Sometimes we put corn oil in it, sometimes we put sunflower oil in it, and what we know about corn oil is that corn is GMO'd in our country, and so you're not really getting corn when you're getting corn oil. Okay, so the ingredients, not too bad. Okay, there's not chemicals in there, right? Not a lot going on, but let's look at the nutrients. Okay, the percentages of the nutrients. We're not getting a whole lot of nutrients in here. Probably the biggest thing we're getting is potassium from the potatoes, getting some carbohydrates, getting some fat, okay? Not bad, we're getting decent fat, okay? So potato chips, not too bad, not great, doesn't have a lot of nutrients, really not giving your body much, but we tend to get addicted to them, we tend to eat a lot of them, and then we're just having starchy carbs and fat going into our system, and our body just stores it as fat, okay? All right, next one. So this is taquitos. Now you think, oh, taquitos, well that's a food, a real food. Taquitos are just made from typically corn tortilla with chicken filling in the middle. Maybe some beans and rice in it as too. But what I want you to notice about this one is the ingredients. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit and let you look at the list of ingredients in this item. 2 paragraphs of ingredients. The first paragraph is for the ingredients in the filling of the chicken. I want you to read through that. And then I want you to look at the ingredients in the tortilla. There's a whole lot of words in there that I don't know what they mean, and that I'm assuming you don't either, and I can't pronounce a lot of them. Good rule of thumb that we like to teach you is 5 ingredients or less is going to be a good guide for you to know that what you're eating is food, is real food, and the ingredients in it are real food. So this list of ingredients has a lot of chemicals in it. And another rule of thumb we like to use is if your great-grandmother doesn't recognize what these words are and cannot pronounce them, then you do not want to put them in your body, because your body isn't going to recognize them. Okay? Our great-grandparents ate food, real food, not a whole lot of processed food back then. So keep those 2 things in mind. 5 ingredients or less, and pronounce the names and know what they mean. Okay? All right, so this is where you're going to find the ingredients on a label. You'll either find it underneath the food label or off to the side somewhere. Another thing that you need to know is how they list the ingredients is from the most of that kind of food to the least. So the first couple ingredients that you see, that's going to be what there is the most of in that package. And then as the ingredients go down towards the bottom, that's the least. So in this one, water is the first ingredient. So there's a lot of water in here and a lot of beef, okay? And then pinto beans. So those are the most in this packaged food. So a good thing to do is look at your cereal boxes at home. If you have any kind of cereal that's sugary, you're gonna sometimes actually see sugar as the first ingredient, the first or second ingredient in some of the real sugar processed foods. You might see whole grain and then sugar, but the whole grain actually isn't whole grain. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So be aware of the ingredient listings. Next handout, sprouted wheat. Okay, so this is an organic product. This is bread, and it's considered pretty good, but even so, you still have to be careful. Just picking up a piece of, package of organic bread doesn't necessarily mean that it is going to be perfect. So we always want to read the labels, and no matter what we pick up. So looking at this sprouted grain bread, we got some saturated fat going on in here, and 0 grams of trans fat, but the total fat is 0.5 grams. So what does that tell me? That tells me that there's 0.5 grams of trans fat in here. So I wouldn't buy this bread, okay? There doesn't need to be trans fat in bread, okay? But what I do want you to look at is the ingredients, because the ingredients are pretty good. Now there's more than 5 ingredients, but that's okay, because everything on the ingredients side is real food. So take a look at those ingredients. Pretty good, okay? Not too much chemicals and things that you can't pronounce. Okay, so what I want you to do, we're going to summarize here. and get you on your way. But what I want you to do is think about a couple questions that you can ask yourself when you are grocery shopping. So first question is this something that my body can use and be well served by? And the second question is my body going to know what to do with this food? Okay? Because what, as a little review, happens with food when your body doesn't know what to do with it? It gets stored as fat, yeah, and also toxins. Toxins build up in our body. It builds up in our liver, it builds up in our gut, it builds up in our skin. We get, different things coming out. So toxins and fat, you want to keep that in mind when you're buying food that your body actually doesn't know what to do with. Okay, moving on. So what is the most important thing when you're going into a store now is to be looking at the food labels on everything that you buy. Now, is there a food label on a artichoke? No. Is there a food label on a head of cabbage or a bunch of carrots? No, there's not. There doesn't need to be, because that food is real food. It doesn't have anything else in it. So, except what you need to be careful of in the grocery stores is buying fruits that are not organic, because many times they pump sugar into them. So like strawberries, non-organic strawberries get sugar pumped into them so that they're sweeter, especially if you're buying them in the off season. So they don't have to put the ingredients on fruit and vegetables, but you need to be careful that that is kind of a loophole, that some food growers do pump sugar into apples and strawberries and different kinds of berries. Okay? All right, so I hope this class was helpful. You have a homework assignment, just a couple things. The first thing is that I would like you to read the labels of every food that you purchase from now on, okay? And you're gonna start reading labels and you might not remember everything, but the more you read them, the more you're gonna understand them. You can also always refer back to this class. You can also Google any items that you don't understand what they are, if they are edible, if they're foodstuffs, chemicals, or not, harmful or not harmful. The second thing is I want you to go to the cereal section of the store next time you're there, and I want you to pick out a box of like Lucky Charms or Fruit Loops or some kind of sugary cereal that we get advertised to us all the time, and kids get advertised to all the time. And I want you to turn it over and I want you to read the ingredients. And I want you to note where sugar is on the list of ingredients, where it stands first, second, third, fourth position, okay? And I also want you to look at the ingredients on there. And one thing that you'll notice is a lot of cereals have something called enriched wheat flour. Now, doesn't that sound good? Enriched wheat flour. Okay, here's another loophole, trick, I call it kind of deception from the processed food industry, and that is that they use the word enriched. Now, when we think of the word enriched, we think of our lives are being enriched, our body is being enriched, it's going to be good for us. But in the processed food world, they use that purposefully so that we buy it. But what it really means is that they have taken the flour, enriched wheat flour, and they have stripped it of all its nutrients, they have pulled everything out except the wheat germ, and they have bleached it, put back in the nutrients, but they're synthetic this time, and then they call it enriched wheat flour, and it's not really wheat flour. And most of you in this Recreate program, hopefully all of you, have read the Wheat Belly book and you know what's gone on with wheat. So be careful of enriched wheat flour. When you look at the Lucky Charms or the Fruit Loops or any of these sugary cereals, I can imagine that it's going to say enriched wheat flour. So that's going to be something that keeps showing up time and again. And you're going to actually look at that and say, huh, I used to think that was a good thing, but it's not. Okay, so those are your two homework assignments. The last one is for you to choose one, or you can choose several other people to pass on this education to of how to read food labels. I hope you enjoyed the class, and I hope that you utilize it every time you go to the grocery store. We'll see you soon.